Welcome to my podcast, Voices on the Journey. My name is Jarvis Lepper. Today we have teachers from the greater Moncton area, Nathan McDonald and Mike Belong. Mike and Nathan are also part of our Journey Church family. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jarvis. Hi, Nathan.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for being here. We've been through a very difficult year. We've been through a year like no other. And the question is, what will the post-pandemic world look like in the education world? What kind of reality will emerge? For educators, it will be a different world with some silver linings, thankfully. Mike, as teachers, what do you anticipate will be the new reality post-pandemic?
Well, as teachers, I think it's going to be a new reality that will also coincide for students. So the new reality for teachers will be something that will complement students, because what has happened with the pandemic is forced us to do a lot of online learning to keep people safe. But the high school level, what they did, because we have huge numbers, is we've divided our population into two halves of about 600 students. So one group would be physically there and some would be online. So our teachers get all laptops, and our students at the high school level were provided laptops. So all the high school kids and the teachers have them now. So that device and that cost upfront structure is not going out the window. They paid for it, they're going to utilize it. It's going to be more of a hybrid model. So our teachers, who have now had a lot of growth this last year to learn how to use different platforms like Office 365, D2L, distance to learning, Microsoft Teams, etc., they're going to still continue to do that to communicate, and students are going to have to still use that. All that work by teachers are realizing that they can work effectively using in-person and online. And one of the things that's really interesting about this, Jarvis and Nathan, is that as a principal, I used to get calls from parents saying, we're going away for Florida for March break, and we're going to stay an extra week. Can your teacher provide me some work? So then I'd have to go to the teacher, and the teacher said, well, geez, Mike, I teach 120 kids. What are we going to do? Now the onus is on the student that the teacher will upload the lessons. It's all there for them. They log in, and that's kind of going to be our new reality. Don't get me wrong, though. We're going to need that in person, as I spoke about last year. It's a really vital and important component of growth, but it's not going out. The technology is not going away.
Mm-hmm. Nathan, we have heard stories of anti-Asian hate during this pandemic. One Asian woman that I know recently said, as an Asian woman, I've been made to feel dehumanized and treated with utter disrespect because of the body I was born into. What is a good way to tackle Asian racism so students can journey forward?
Well, education is, probably one of the biggest ways to fight racism in general, and that the same would be true for Asian racism. We obviously know where that comes from some of the comments from the former U.S. president, and worldwide, and even currently, there's some investigation and calls for investigation into the release of COVID and how that happened and whether it was intentional or whatever, and all that might eventually get decided. But really, we've got to help people and students understand that there's a difference between what a government may or may not have done and the individual people that are just happen to be from that race, and they don't really have any more to do with COVID than you or I do. And so but racism really is fought through education and through knowledge and sharing and getting to know others. And I'm thankful to be at a school where diversity is quite enormous, and it's an exciting place to be, and there's all kinds of opportunity for sharing and getting to know people from other cultures, and it's for the most part positive. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it's been really positive. Yeah.
And if I could add to that a little bit, Nathan said that eloquently, is we don't have the answers as educators. We have to have we have to be open to other groups, and we have to be exercise tolerance, and we have to teach students about understanding. But we have close to 300 students. There's 1,200 students at Moncton High School that Nathan and I have in our building, and we have about 300 that are international staffs, whether it be from Ukraine or Philippines or China or Syria. We have quite a group there. So we have to understand that we have to work with students to learn and teach them about tolerance and indifference. So that's important.
I know African American in Nova Scotia, he said, don't tolerate me, celebrate me.
Yeah.
You know, celebrate diversity. And I also heard it said it's not enough to be non-racist, but we also have to be anti-racist. In other words, we have to take a stand to be a voice for the voiceless. And thank you for educating students on this so important topic.
You're welcome.
Mike, we are all on a mental health journey, but 50% of Canadians report that their mental health has been worse during this pandemic. And specifically with youth, I know a number of youth who have committed suicide during this pandemic. What resources are in place to help the students' mental health?
Well, it's an excellent question because there are a plethora of resources. There are all kinds, but the greatest resource we have is people. So we have physical resources and we have people you can turn to. So it's really important for our young people and students to understand that teachers are not perfect. We don't have the answers. We have stress and we have our own issues as well. But we are trained in a program 2 or 3 years ago called Changing Minds, where actually Nathan was a facilitator and was one of the people that taught. So every teacher in the district and in our province went through a program where we had so many modules on changing minds. And one of the things, like for example, people know when you see a person with a broken back or cancer and they're getting treated, you say they're sick. And we accept that because they got a cast on their foot or whatever. But what we have a hard time dealing with is that when people have mental health, they're every bit as sick, but they don't look it. So sometimes people don't accept that. And those are kind of the things we were taught in our Changing Mind modules to be understanding about. The other thing you have to understand is our guidance counselors are incredible, especially at Moncton High School. We're staffed for 2 guidance counselors of the population we have, and that's not enough, but we have 4. Those are choices we make as an admin staff. We have 4. We have 1 for every grade level, and each guidance counselor has programs in place. We have groups that meet at noon hour. We have QR codes on the on the wall. Our website, and this goes to any student that goes to our church, that goes to other Harrison Trimble, McNaughton, whatever. On our website, we have programs such as Helping Tree, which I sent you a link to beforehand, Jarvis. You can feel free to use. And we have, the online chat groups that happen. So there's all kinds of resources, and those 2 links that I sent you are students can go get them. It could be you could be dealing with harassment and bullying. You could be dealing with drugs and alcohol, and you're worried about your behaviors in that area. You could be dealing with mental health and stress, and you're thinking about suicide. There's the kids' helpline there, so it's all there. But if you don't know how to access it, one place is go to the website, school website, and you can find it. But if you cannot, go see a principal, a teacher, a guidance counselor, because we will help you. The problem we have, Jarvis, is sometimes it's like bullying. Because bullying's an underground activity. It happens when nobody's looking. It's happening in the bathroom. You can't see when somebody's struggling with mental health or issues always, and they can be putting a facade on. So we need to teach our young people it's okay to be not feeling well and to turn to people. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to say, I know I'm not well here. So that's important to know.
And for those listening today, I want to share a resource. There's a school teacher in Ontario by the name of Brett Ullman. He travels the world talking on mental health, and he has an amazing video called The Walking Wounded. And so many great resources, but I want to highlight that one. Just as a follow-up question, Mike, with the mental health, I know this pandemic is impacting all age groups, young and the older children as well. Do you think that the senior high kids are affected the most during this pandemic?
Yeah, they're highly affected. And it's a great question because they have a lot of our high school kids in grade 12 are going on to post-secondary, and they're wondering if they're well prepared or not. That's their biggest concern. And what we've done, and they need to know, is that as teachers, what we did is we took our curriculum and we have what's called nice to knows and need to knows. The need knows are essential outcomes. They provide the scaffolding to be successful at the next level. So what teachers have done for the province is we've created essential parts of the curriculum and taken out the nice to know stuff, which is nice to know. We've provided the essentials that they need to be successful. So for example, at my school, I wouldn't want a student in chemistry 12-2 in Mrs. McManaman's class not getting what they need to be successful when they go to St. Mary's or Dow. They're sitting with kids from all over the world to say, they have what they need. We need to put our kids' minds at ease to say they are prepared. Failure to prepare is preparing for failure. We have prepared them. They prepared themselves. They'll be okay. The way we learn has affected them because some people may not feel like they learned it to the same breadth or depth, but they certainly have been provided what they need to be successful. But it's okay to be worried about those things because everybody's worried about that. A lot of the grade 12s, whether it's my students with 99 average, 65 average, have come and said, I'm worried about university or college. It'll all work itself out.
I think
Nathan,
socially too, it's been
yeah.
difficult for that age group. They're at an age when their social circle gets a lot bigger and it's not as controlled by the parents. And you know, this generation, last couple of years of high schoolers haven't had the chance to experience that to the same extent as the previous generation. So it's just been hard. It's been hard on them in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point, Nathan, because when you look at the situation at schools, like our grade 12 class this year was divided into two groups. So half of the grade 12s in a grad class didn't see the other half all year because they're on a different track. Now, they might have seen each other out in the events in the community, but can you imagine when I graduated from Moncton High in 1984, that's how old I am, we went to school with the same kids every day, and you knew your grad class, and it was a very special time. We have half the kids that don't even communicate with the other half. So that's tough on them. And we didn't have sports this year. We didn't have assemblies and spirit games. So those are things that really affects their high school experience. But it also, we've created a resilient student because they've had to overcome a lot of adversity. So the students that are listening to this, that are chimed in for the podcast, you have become more resilient, and it's going to pay dividends for you when you go to post-secondary.
Nathan, our culture is radically changing, and because of this pandemic, there's even more change. Moving forward, how can educators stay on top of the constant change?
Well, constant change is probably the only thing I've been able to rely on as an educator my whole career. We're constantly, every time there's a political change at the provincial level, you know, education gets whipped in a different direction. And I'm not trying to be political. It's all political parties have done that to education in our province and probably around the world or across the country. And so, yeah, so that constant change is hard on us. And really, I'd advocate for some system in place to allow educators to really control the reins of the direction of education more so than the politics. And I felt that my whole career, but we're just really seeing it in frustrating ways the last few years, not just around the pandemic, but even before that. It's something that is really hard on educators and education and schools. And you get momentum going, you get an idea, you get, you know, trying to change your school in a certain direction, and you get excited and there's funding for it and support, and all of a sudden it's gone and you're told you got to go a different direction. And that gets very frustrating for teachers and school leaders. And
it's a good point, Nathan, but it's good for our young people to understand that you need to be resilient and ready for change, because change is happening so rapidly over time. And Nathan's right. What happens is in government, when elections come up, two biggest platforms are education and healthcare. So a good way to get voted in is to be able to come up with a health or public education platform to say, we're going to do this. And then, of course, that's changed. So sometimes as teachers, we get during a platform and government change and we have to do something new. So that's frustrating. So I think that's what Nathan's trying to say. But to that point, students have to understand that change is going to be part of their future. And like teachers have to adapt when there's a government change with these platforms, they're going to have to be understanding that they're going to have to be flexible and resilient to change as well.
I heard it said small change gets you small results. So bring on the big change, good change in the lives of these students. Mike, I heard it said, don't let your fatigue make decisions for you. After this pandemic, many of us will be tired mentally. Yes, we're tired now, but especially after, we're going to take that deep breath. We're tired. What are some ways to recharge after this pandemic as an educator?
Well, first of all, one of the ways as an educator, and don't take this wrong way for people that are watching a principal say this, get a break from the academics. Take a break from it. It's okay to go for a walk. It's okay to go for a bike ride. It's okay to go fishing. It's okay to go get some fresh air and be in the woods. You need that. Human beings need that break. And some people get so driven that they're into the books and studies all the time. And it's good to have good study habits and routines. We all are creatures of habit, but you need a break. You need to look after yourself physically, mentally, and socially, and emotionally. And you need to look after your body and be healthy and eat well. But I would also say that in terms of recharging yourself, I just mentioned earlier about technology staying. It's going to be part of here, but give yourself a break from it. The blue light syndrome. At night, sometimes if you hear your child's phone beeping in the room, don't be upset with them. They're hooked on it. But we need to get rid of the blue light syndrome. People are not sleeping properly. There's all kinds of research on it. But you, as a young adolescent, the kids that are listening, don't make it upon your parents to do that. Give yourself a break from it by putting it in another room. I don't bring my phone to my bedroom anymore because it'll go off. And my wife had to change my notifications on it. But even I've learned to say, no, it can wait. So we have to do that. So make sure that post-pandemic, that you have balance in your life, that you have structures to your academics, but you have structures towards your fitness and your health and being with other people, because it's emotionally and socially important to be with other people. And we've learned that this year.
I remember Eugene Peterson, an author, said that busyness is not a commitment, but a betrayal. And it's so important to take that breath and to slow down so we can be recharged. Nathan, someone said that just because you have made progress doesn't mean you've reached your potential. What goals do you have in place to reach that full potential?
Well, first of all, you've got to surround yourself with people that challenge you and allow yourself to be challenged and strive for greatness or greater than you are, and set some goals that are achievable, but maybe difficult or might seem harder to reach, and break it down, step by step. You've got to kind of every day work a little bit towards those goals. And if you don't have a good day, that's okay. You try again, you get back on the horse and you try again. So, I mean, it's just, and that in a teaching career, that's the same thing. And if I'm teaching students, that goal setting is a big thing I work on with students, trying to lay out some goals, not just academic, not just assignments, but personal goals, growth goals. And I try to support students in achieving them as much as I can. So I'm lucky to have a job that I get to do that. So it's, it's good to strive for your greatest potential, and not to be depressing, most of us we're not going to actually achieve your greatest potential, but it's healthy to aim high and don't get discouraged when you don't quite get there. Just be happy and proud of yourself for the striving that you have done.
Mike, this pandemic has forced us to be innovative. How can you foster leaders to be innovative as you journey forward?
What a great question, specific to me and Nathan at Moncton High, because I've got a great example that came out in the paper, I think, today. But what we need to really do is peel back the restraints we put on students and our young people and let them flourish. So what I mean by that is we've often set up structures, because one of the things about education is everybody knows about education because we all did it. Even everybody went to school, so everybody thinks they're an expert on it. But what we have to understand is, and we all always come back saying, well, it worked for me, it worked for me. Well, we're not at the same time. And what's happened is students today need a voice. We've got 1,200 kids in the school. There's many far brighter than the teaching staff, far brighter than me, I could tell you that, in our building. We need to allow them to have a voice. So one of the things we've done, Jarvis, Nathan and I, and our teachers at our schools, we've allowed in grade 12 students to take a personalization course where they get a credit, but they go into a course and the teacher oversees it, and they come up with their own scenarios or problems or concerns or whatever, and they work on those and they research. So for example, we had a student last semester that invited me in for a presentation on looking at getting rid of plastics, what things that we need plastic for, and coming up with other alternatives. And then she did a grant and she presented to the health minister and so on. But Riley Young, a student at our school, just did a thing here about Moncton High. Right now we have about 3 out of every 10 kids living in poverty at Moncton High School. And she had the Minister of Education in the school. I think it was today. I wasn't there today. And she had also the person from the deck was there. Our principal, my vice principal, Mr. Farrell, was there. all part of it. And he did a presentation on this is our poverty in our school. This is what our kids need. And this is the ethnical groups in our group and how disadvantaged they are because they don't have the same culture, so they don't play the same sports and they're not as involved. So it was a really great presentation. It was in the paper, but that carries more voice coming from a student than me. If it comes from me as a principal, I'm complaining to the government, oh yeah, he just wants more resources for his school. But this is a student that took a personalization project that was passionate about helping those that don't have a voice and they don't feel like they're part of the community, and having the Minister of Education in our school and other key people. I think that has a profound impact. So in order to answer your question and how to foster leaders, think outside the box. Whether you're at the church running the youth programs or at a school running school, allow the students to input on what they need to do to grow the church. We sometimes think as youth leaders to say, we got to do this with the youth, do that. Ask them what they think they need and allow them to come up with some ideas. We still, at the end of the day, have the overarching control of the situation on what we can and cannot do, but allow them to flourish by giving them a say.
And do we have the guts to try something knowing that it might not work?
What a great question. Have some guts. How are we going to teach our kids to come up with creative, innovative ways of doing things and doing things different if we can't model that ourselves? So that's a great way to put it. Have the guts, step out of your comfort zone, allow students to try something different. You try something different as a leader and let the students try something different.
Nathan, how have you seen students' creativity play out as we reach the finish line of this pandemic?
Well, Mike's example, shows some creativity from that student as well. But, and I guess during this pandemic, I mentioned it last week when we spoke, the chance for high school students to be home for every other day has both forced them to develop independent study skills and struggle through that a little bit. Some were more ready for it than others, and some are still struggling with it. But it's been an opportunity for students to be more creative. They've been able to kind of slow down and work at something all day long on one course project or something. At times, anyway, through the year, they've been able to really tease something out, get a little idea, and go their own way with it in a way that they maybe weren't able to when you go to school every day and you've got this class you're going to and you got 50 minutes to do it, and that normal routine sometimes doesn't allow for as much creativity as we've been able to see from the model of class that we had this year. I'm not advocating that we continue that. I really think it's important that we get students back in person. But it's been interesting to see what students come up with. And I think those skills are not going to be lost in their future when they go on to later grades or through post-secondary or to jobs. They've developed a maturity and a way of thinking on their own that they didn't have before. And they were just kind of more likely to be waiting to be directed by the teacher on every step. And they just had to figure it out a little bit more and communicate with each other and try to figure out how to do things. And they really, everything looked a lot different this year in a lot of different ways. And teachers were a lot more accepting of different types of assignments or different types of ideas, and in the way that things were submitted through, some things looked a little bit traditional, but some assignments were certainly not. And that's been coming in education anyway, but this year we get to see it expand to another level, just partly because students were on their own trying to figure things out and came up with their own way of doing things.
And young creative people want to be around people who make them sharper in these areas, who make them better.
Yeah, and Jarvis, that's a life skill. Like if I'm a golfer, when I play with better golfers, I get better. If I'm around people that are challenging me to think differently, I start thinking differently. Nathan makes a good point, because you asked a question earlier about how will things change. One of the things that we call it scope and sequence in a classroom is how fast you can pace. What happens in the class of 25 people, some may learn more quickly than others. So the fast learners are held back by the pace the teacher goes at. The ones that are just as bright, but learn at a slower rate, but they're as smart, they just don't pick up as quickly. They have to maybe be told a few more times. So what's going to allow, especially with the technology now, is it's going to allow some students to go at a quicker pace, because here's what we're doing. If you're finished it, you can work on more stuff or work on a personalization, and you don't penalize the student that's struggling behind. So I think there's going to be a really good happy medium here that's going to develop.
Mike, what are some habits that students are practicing in this new day that the church might be ignoring?
Well, I think the church does a really good job adjusting and adapting, especially with our leadership, people like yourself and Dave and everybody at the church. I think we go to conferences, we keep ourselves as current as we can. But I can tell you, the best way to stay current is to talk to our youth. And it's really important to understand that it's normal behavior for our teenagers to be a little bit rebellious, a little bit irritable. That's part of being a teenager. But it's when those types of behaviors become more long-term or extreme that as leaders and parents, we need to be cognizant of that, be able to turn to our school or our physician to ask what's going on. Signs of mental health. So what we need to do is we need to be understanding that and supportive of our students, and our kids, but you have to be looking for signs. They're going to be irritable, they're going to have behaviors. That's being a teenager. It's not easy being a teenager. If they're not eating well, if they're sleeping long hours, if they're locked in the room without coming out for long periods of time. These are things that we're taught to say, be cognizant of, be aware of, talk to them about. There might be underlying issues that are going on, because like I mentioned earlier, depression and mental health and people can be genetically predisposed to that is not something people choose. So be aware that your child may be experiencing normal teenage behaviors, but they can be something more than normal. So I would encourage our leaders at the church to continue to grow in those areas. And I really like the fact that education works closely with our church. Our church has done a really good job. Like when I was at Besbro, we used to put on luncheons for our teachers and stuff. I think we've done a really good job connecting with the church, schools, and I think we can help each other in those areas.
And just as a follow-up, I heard that Generation Z or Z, what are we? Correct me.
Yeah.
Z. Generation Z is about 30% of our population. So I think we certainly need to keep our ears open to these younger people.
Absolutely. And something we didn't talk about here is, LGBTQ, transgendering students, gender neutral. Those are things that we have not been accustomed to, you and I growing up, and maybe Mr. McDonald, but we have many students experiencing that today, and we have to be understanding to what they're going through. And that's not easy without being educated. And what we've done is we've actually sat with them to get them to help educate us. How are we what do you want us to call you? By your pronoun, your name, or what? These are things that seem straightforward that we have to be understanding. So you meet with those groups of people to say, what do you need from us?
Nathan, if the current crisis is a disruption, how will you be prepared to be disrupted again?
Well, if this is just a disruption, I don't know. This was a significant disruption for sure. But I think you can count on life being disrupted again and again and again. The older I get, the more aware of that I become. And hopefully this is the significant disruption to, we're not going to have global disruptions like this, hopefully, all the time. But, this can help us build resilience. Going through this together as a whole world, we can individually become more resilient and ready for our own personal disruptions that we are bound to go through in life. And I think we just have to be aware that, we aren't in control of things, even though we try to be. And at some level, it's maybe healthy to try to have some control over your life and things around you. At the same time, you really have to accept ultimately that you're not in control, and you got to give it up to God and let Him guide you through those moments. And it's that simple and that complicated all at once. Going through these things build resilience in us, and if we allow them to, they can help build trust in God as we go through it.
Mike, what lessons do you want to carry into the future after the pandemic that will make an impact on future students?
Well, for me, I think it's important for us to, as educators and teachers, to look critically at what students need to be successful in the future. So one of the things in education we talk about is connect with kids, then connect with curriculum. So curriculum is the basis by which what we do in school when they come. We have curriculum we follow. It's teachers just don't teach what they want. They have to follow curriculum prescribed by the province. I always joke it's not Julie Anders, these are a few of my favorite things. It's what a prescribed curriculum. But we are too quick to get the curriculum covered without connecting with the student. So when the students come in the building and there's world issues, like when you open the TV up and you hear the travesty and of what happened out in BC with the 215 children they found behind a residential school.
Right.
Have a conversation about it. Did you watch the news? If they didn't, have a conversation. Connect with kids. Allow that into your classrooms of open dialogue, critical and important dialogue. And that we need to do, I think, as teachers, and we started to do this, Jarvis, is triangulation of data. Let me explain that quickly. When we assess a student, we assess a student based on products, observations, and conversations. Products are the physical things like tests, essays, presentations. Those are physical, you can put a mark on. We need to put some weight, and we've started to do this at Moncton High the last few years, and the province has, Nathan can talk to it even as well as I can, is we built into observations and conversations as part of the learning process. What that allows is a student that they come to school and we're having a dialogue about maybe meiosis or mitosis or whatever we're talking about in school, that process of learning, like the best way I can bring that is when I go down to my shop class and they're building something and the student's building it different, and I'm watching them build it. How do you make that square? Well, I do this. We learn in the learning process. It's not always an end product. So what am I going to learn taking forward from this is that we need to restructure our classrooms based on the learning process, not just a learning result at the end. So the process of learning itself is a very important part of it, and teachers need to build that into their programming with their students. Students need to know the importance of being in school every day because A, it's a life skill to be able to go to work every day. They need you to work, show up one day a week's not going to cut it, but we need to build it in as teachers as well and have some weight.
Good answer. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mike and Nathan, for painting a picture about our next chapter in the education world after this pandemic. I have a riddle for you as we close. I want to see if you guys can get it. Apparently, it's one of the oldest riddles that we have today. It comes from ancient Sumer. So let's see who gets it first, if you can get it. Are you ready?
Okay.
We're ready.
You walk into it with your eyes closed, and you walk out of it with your eyes opened. What is it? I've stumped the teachers.
Ooh.
You walk into it with your eyes closed, and you walk out of it with your eyes opened.
Education?
Ding, 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 ding. A school.
Oh,
The answer.
I think Nathan's pretty close. We got to give him the answer.
I'll give you the credit. You get $1 million today.
Sounds good.
But honestly, though, thank you so much, guys, for opening up our eyes to the education world during this special time that we're in. And I hope that this will be a great resource for not only teachers, but for anyone listening to this. So thank you, guys.
You're welcome,
Thanks for the opportunity.